I want to tell you why things are not quite the same. Galwan, what happened in June 2020 was a violent incident, so was this one. But there are very many key differences between what happened in Galwan and what happened in Tawang. For instance, in Galwan, the Chinese far outnumbered Indian troops in Ladakh during that particular clash. Whereas in Tawang, Indians vastly outnumbered the Chinese patrol party that had arrived with insidious intentions. In Galwan, the Indian side was ambushed by the Chinese side. In Tawang, the Indian side was fully prepared because it had advanced intelligence and preparations. In Galwan, India lost 20 men. China lost at least 17 men. In Tawang, thankfully, mercifully, no deaths, no casualties. There were 9 injuries on the Indian side and at least 22 injuries, if not more, on the Chinese side. They definitely suffered more in this one. In Galwan, the Chinese had armored vehicles and logistic trucks backing them up in the flashpoint area. In Tawang, no backup whatsoever for the Chinese patrol party, and that's one of the reasons why they probably retreated so fast. In Galwan, the Chinese side had crossed over into the Indian side. In Tawang, while the Chinese did initially cross over to the Indian side crossed over into the Chinese side to chase them back, and that's actually where most of the fighting took place. Very important, similarity or, way of comparing the two fights is that in Galwan, troops were taken captive by both sides during the skirmish. In Tawang, however, we understand that during the skirmish, in the heat of what was taking place during the retreat, the Indian side captured 5 retreating Chinese men but released them shortly thereafter. It was just as a warning message. There was nothing ill-intentioned there. In Galwan, the Chinese stone pelting had triggered the brawl. In Tawang, it was verbal abuse and stone pelting that triggered that vicious Indian response. There were fatal casualties on both sides. Remember, in Galwan and in Tawang, only injuries were sustained on both sides. So over the next few days, you're going to hear a lot about Galwan, Rinchinla and Tawang. What's this report? India dominating on the icy heights of Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh, this time beating China at its own game, thwarting yet another bid to land grab. The Indian Army's upper hand can be explained via these high-resolution satellite images from the very clash spot in Tawang, accessed exclusively by India today. The images from the day of the clash show that Tawang was no Galwan, the other clash that it is being compared with. In June 2020, India was outnumbered in Ladakh's Galwan Valley by sheer numbers of intruding Chinese troops. In Galwan, India lost men despite inflicting serious casualties on the marauding Chinese after being caught unawares. But 2 years down the line in Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh, Indian forces were more than prepared, with advanced ground intelligence about possible Chinese escalation and readying a counter-ambush by quick deployment of reinforcements. So when the Chinese troops intruded, they were met with a ferocious fight back. This time it was the turn of the Chinese army to be outnumbered and overwhelmed. While in Galwan, Chinese outnumbered Indians, the tables turned completely in Tawang. In Galwan, China had ambushed the Indian side, but in Tawang, intelligence alerts ensured India was ready. While in Galwan, India lost 20 men and China at least 17 men, in Tawang, just 9 Indians were hurt compared to 22 Chinese. In Galwan, Chinese armored vehicles provided backup, but there was no such luck for China in Tawang. While in Galwan, Chinese men had intruded, it was the turn of Indians to barge back into China in Tawang. In Galwan, troops from both sides were taken captive, but in Tawang, India captured 5 Chinese soldiers before releasing them a short while later during the skirmish. China was the aggressor in Galwan with stone pelting. In Tawang, it was Chinese verbal abuse and stone hurling which caused the trouble. Since Galwan, India has boosted troop deployments and boosted border infrastructure, including intelligence gathering, learning valuable lessons on how to defeat Chinese misadventures and also preempt them, thereby ending up giving the Chinese army another proverbial bloody nose. With Ankit Kumar in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs editor, is with us as well. She's been watching all of these developments really closely. Earlier this year, Geeta had also visited Taiwan amidst the conflict there for a China perspective. Geeta, chest thumping is not going to be the order of the day, no matter how one looks at what happened in Tawang, because the situation on the India-China border is far bigger than just one little clash that took place in one tiny sector of Arunachal Pradesh. How is the External Affairs Ministry, the government, how are they viewing what happened? You know, they had to reply in Parliament today, but what does it say about the larger situation and standoff?
Well, the boundary question aside, Shiv, which is a larger issue to be resolved between the two countries, the fact that these incidents are taking place and they've become serious after Galwan, we're seeing second such instance which has gone violent, and there have been injuries, if not very serious, nonetheless injuries. Having said that, the Chinese reaction is very interesting, Shiv. It is straight out of China's strategic and diplomatic playbook, where they claim and allege that the other side transgressed. Why is that so? Because China has always laid claim not just on Indian land, but also in every other country that they have a dispute with, that they claim the territory of that country and then say that the forces there transgress, and that's why the Chinese took action. So this is absolutely out of Chinese strategic and diplomatic playbook. Having said that, the reaction is very important, Shiv. India is the president of the G20, is going to host 200 odd meetings in over 50 cities. Chinese participation is going to be important. One of the reasons why, in all probability, we're looking at China acting up at the border, given that they must have assumed that India's reaction would be rather muted, which is not the case, because we're talking about land over here. But zoom out a little and look at the presidency and the fact that India will be hosting the G20 and 200 odd meetings where Chinese participation, including the concluding summit, where Xi Jinping's participation is going to be rather important for India.